Let's continue our work. I'm going to press Ctrl Z here to turn everything back to their primary condition. Now let's continue our discussion regarding what we have, the items that we have in mechanical settings window: inside gap, outside gap, and single line gap. First, let's talk about inside gap and outside gap. If you take a look at what we have here, let me activate thin lines here to get rid of the thickness. Now, we have a couple of ducts here. First one with a middle elevation of 3200, the next one 2500 millimeters. And they are set on top of each other like this. Now, this area here is what we call the outside gap. And then this one would be the inside gap. All right, so these were the first two concepts. Then if we go ahead and open up mechanical settings window again, you would be able to control these gaps even further. For example, I'm going to set this on 1 millimeters. And as you can see, the gap would be increased. Okay, let's try another number. For example, 2 and 2. Again, it will be increased. And we can also go with different numbers because these are in fact annotative items and they could be modified based on the scale that we have specified for our project. For example, we set the gaps on 2 millimeters. The scale here is 1/50th. And in fact, the gap would be something around 100 millimeters here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set this back on 1/100th. And this would change to 200 millimeters. Well, about 200 millimeters. Okay, now let's go back to our mechanical settings window. And set these back on their default numbers. Like this. Alright, now let's talk about the next item that we have here, which is a single line. Okay, let's move this duct up here and then set the detail level on coarse. As you can see, the duct would be displayed as a single line. Now, we actually have placeholders which kind of work the same as single lines. Control Z. Let me change the middle elevation here, 3200. And this would be, for example, the placeholder one. Okay, let's go back to mechanical settings window. Now, I'm going to try changing the outside gap again. For example, again to 2 millimeters. It'll be applied here, but not in here. Let me increase the number to make this more visible. For example, 10 millimeters. Okay, 10 is too large actually. About 5, 4, 3. Okay, back to the window. Now set this one on 3. 3 again. And yeah, this is it. Let's move on. As I said, we have a single line. So far, we have found out that if we set the detail level on coarse, the ducts would be displayed linearly or as a single line. Let me show it to you again. Here we go. Now I'm going to use a placeholder as well. 3200. And set a couple of ducts like this. We have some sort of a gap here. We call these single lines. So, for example, in the mechanical settings window, if I set the single line on 3, as you can see, the single lines would change. Let me set the detail level on fine. Then back here, set the outside gap on 4 millimeters. So, again, we would see single lines when we are using placeholders or when we have used coarse as our detail level. And remember, if you set the detail level on either medium or fine, the placeholders would use outline, exactly what we have here. Alright, let's move on in our mechanical settings window. The next item that we can discuss is duct settings here. Alright, as you can see, we have some specific settings here that we can go through before, after, or even while we are drawing the sketches. However, it is better to go through some of them before we start drawing anything. All right, let's start talking about all of them one by one. First item is use a node scale for single line fittings. Now, as you can see by default, it is activated. Then the next item is duct fittings annotation size, and it is set on 3 millimeters. All right, let's talk about this. All right, first off, it only works on 3D elements, so I'm going to select this. And then I'm going to continue draw some more ducts here. We can change up the type, for example. And then we can continue drawing these ducts like this. All right, now if I set the detail level on coarse again, although the ducts would be displayed linearly, it'll keep the fittings. Now, if I change up the scale, we would see that the size of the fittings would change accordingly, because they are in fact annotative items, like this. All right. Now, if we go back to our mechanical settings window, and then if we deactivate this item here, you would be able to specify a fixed up size in here, and then the software would work according to this size. Just remember, when you deactivate that item, none of the items that you have already drawn would be affected. I mean, if you change the scale again, they would change as well. However, when we deactivating the item and then go ahead and draw new elements, let me set this on fine to have a better view. Now I'm going to draw something here like this. I'm going to change this back. And as you can see, the sizes here are completely fixed up. And if we try changing the scale again, nothing would change here. Only the scale of the fittings that we have set before would change. So we can understand that this item, this use a node scale for single line fittings, would only influence the elements that we are going to set, not the elements that we have set before. All right, for now, I'm going to activate this and set this on 5. All right, there's a point here. Let's say we have deactivated this item and then drawn something. Now, let's say we want to be able to change up their sizes through changing the scale here. All right, let's see how we can achieve this goal. Okay, first off, we need to select the fittings. I'm going to do so using a click track. Then from filters, I'm going to select duct fittings. Now, as you can see, we have this option here, use annotation scale. If we activate this, we would be able to do this. And actually, we can do something in reverse. For example, let's say we don't want these elements to change size when we change up the scale. So again, we need to select the elements. Then again, from filter, select duct fittings. And then we need to deactivate use annotation scale from here. All right, now if we go ahead and change up the scale, nothing would happen to the elements. More precisely, I mean the size of the fittings won't change. So again, this is a very useful item that we can use. We just need to know when we need to activate or deactivate it. And actually, by default, it is usually activated. And the size here is usually set on 3 millimeters. All right, the next part that we have here is air density. This is actually a calculative item. I mean, for example, for calculating the size of the ducts or their pressure. I mean, for example, right now it is set on 1.2026 kg on M3 or kilograms on cubic meters. All right, I'm going to go back here and set the detail level on fine and remove all of these. Okay, guys, let's continue our work in the next session.